Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, after 21 hours of negotiations over the weekend, Vice President JD Vance says no deal as the war continues to wage in Iran. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Monday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call for any legal challenges or issues you might be facing, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up as we roll through the program on this very busy Monday morning. All the talk over the weekend was Vice President JD Vance being in Pakistan, covering the ongoing conflict, the ongoing war with Iran. Last week, we learned about a 2-week, at least temporary ceasefire, temporary deal between the United States and Iran as the president threatened to completely obliterate Iranian infrastructure, including their power grid and power generation facility, their physical infrastructure, bridges, and things like that. That was what we were expecting last week. However, it appeared, at least at the time, that talks and negotiations were trending in a better direction, causing the president to call that off and announcing that they had come to a 2-week agreement with Iran to finish up the negotiations, hammer out any of the remaining final details, and come to a close with this ongoing conflict. And so over the weekend, the vice president was already overseas. I don't remember where he was. Maybe he was in Hungary or something like that. He was on an overseas trip. And so with, of course, the ongoing escalation, the ongoing talks, the vice president made a little bit of a pit stop. He was in Pakistan, who has been, to their credit, and I'll say this, a very good intermediary in this entire conflict. Now, obviously, Pakistan has a huge vested interest in the United States not completely carpet bombing one of their neighbors in Iran. There's also a pretty high level of Chinese influence over Pakistan as well. That is an interesting portion of this that is probably worth discussing in greater detail. I'll admit, I don't think we're going to have a chance to get into it on this Monday. We're jam-packed with everything from over the weekend. But of China, who, of course, has a vested interest in Iran as well, they don't want to see anything. But again, putting all of that aside, to the credit of the individuals in Pakistan, and we'll hear from the vice president in just a minute. He'll thank those individuals in Pakistan who, again, to their credit, have been pretty strong negotiators in all this. 21 hours of negotiations ongoing in Pakistan over the weekend, and unfortunately, as the vice president addressed the media that was set up, the foreign media that was set up, he reported that no deal had been made with the Iranians, at least to this point. Here is the vice president on Sunday.
Well, good morning, everybody, and let me say a couple of notes of appreciation. First of all, to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and to Field Marshal Munir, who were both incredible hosts. And whatever shortcomings in the negotiation, it wasn't because of the Pakistanis, who did an amazing job and really tried to help us and the Iranians bridge the gap and get to a deal. We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So
let me pause the vice president right there. I mean, this has really been one of my major points in all of this. Iran has everything to lose. The United States really doesn't have a whole lot on the table. Now, yes, obviously, we don't want Iran producing a nuclear warhead. We don't want them enriching uranium to build some sort of short, medium, or long-range missile. Absolutely. But in terms of the immediate devastation and the immediate destruction, Iran is all in. I mean, there is very few options that they have left as it relates to this ongoing conflict. They have no military left. They have no Navy left. Their air support is essentially obliterated. The people of Iran are frustrated with the leadership. They hate the regime that they've been living under over the last 30 years. There is a lot more for them to lose than the United States. And so when the vice president makes that comment, it's going to be a lot worse, quicker for Iran. He's absolutely correct. And I think we probably need to remember that and take some of that to heart. More from the VP.
We go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms. Questions?
Sir, Nick Robertson from CNN. Precisely what have they rejected here? Can you help us understand it a little bit?
Well, I won't go into all the details because I don't want to negotiate in public after we negotiated for 21 hours in private. But the simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. That is the core goal of the President of the United States, and that's what we've tried to achieve through these negotiations. Again, their nuclear program, such as it is, the enrichment facilities that they had before, they've been destroyed. But the simple question is, do we see a fundamental commitment of will for the Iranians not to develop a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term? We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will. Jen.
Was there a framework on anything? And also, did the Iranian frozen assets come up? And did you reach any conclusions on those frozen assets?
We talked about all those issues, Jen, and we talked about a number of issues beyond that. And so certainly those things came up. But again, we just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms. I think that we were quite flexible. We were quite accommodating. The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway. Preston.
Mr. Vice President, how often did you communicate with President Trump throughout the negotiations? There are reports that there were multiple rounds, where there were breaks in between negotiations. How often did you communicate with the president throughout those rounds, and what was he saying as you were going through these negotiations that you said fell short?
Yeah, obviously we were talking to the president consistently. I don't know how many times we talked to him, a half dozen times, a dozen times over the past 21 hours. We obviously also talked to Admiral Cooper, to Pete, to Marco, to the entire national security team. We talked to Scott Bessent a number of times. So look, we were constantly in communication with the team because we were negotiating in good faith. And we leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it. Thank you.
So there's the comments there from Vice President JD Vance in Pakistan over the weekend. As he mentioned, 21 hours of negotiations with the individuals representing the Iranian regime, the Iranian government. The United States plot with all of this has not changed. I mean, if you go back to things that the president mentioned back in the first Trump administration, go all the way back to 2016, for a decade now, we don't want the Iranian regime, the Iranian government, to continue building a military nuclear program. And, you know, the vice president said something multiple times wrapping up the conversation there that needs to be played out. The United States, and I do truly believe this, came to the table in a good faith negotiation. And I strongly feel that the Iranians did not. They're not interested in good faith negotiations. This is a regime and a group of individuals that cannot be trusted. That is the long and the short of this story. And, you know, we have seen over president after president after president over the last 40 years, these wink, wink, nod, nod deals with Iran for them to stop with their military nuclear program that consistently fall flat. Whether it's Barack Obama dumping billions of dollars, pallets of cash to the Iranians so that they don't cross the red line that we drew in the sand, it doesn't matter. They continue to do it. They are bad faith negotiators. They are bad faith actors. And until the United States gets these concessions, the war will continue. And it's not going to be much longer. As I mentioned, Iran has absolutely nothing to bargain with. Nothing to bargain with. Nothing. They are on their back foot. Everything has been decimated. Everything has been destroyed. And we're no longer going to take these, oh, sure, United States of America, we're not going to do this anymore. We've been fooled by that for the last 30 some odd years. It's not going to work this time. It's just not. Comment coming in on our YouTube channel this morning. Iran has been 1 week away from nuclear weapons for the last 26 years, and you still believe it. I'm not, well, I'm not saying that I believe that they're 1 week away from a nuclear weapon. I'm not saying that. Obviously, you're uninformed as to what my stance is on this. But let's be perfectly clear. Iran has made it its public perception and its public information that they want to develop a medium to long range nuclear weapon. They do, in fact, want to do that. I don't think that is a secret by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think anybody, I'm not, and I can't imagine anybody, would truly believe that Iran is not interested in continuing to enrich uranium to the point in which they can develop a long-range nuclear weapon, put it in some sort of nuclear warhead and strap it on top of a ballistic missile or an ICBM or something of that nature, right? That is abundantly clear to me. And I don't have reason to believe anything else. That's what they want. And we have seen both Democrat and Republican administrations consistently go to the negotiating table with Iran, walk away with a handshake deal that Iran immediately, and I mean immediately, reneges, immediately walks back. In some cases, within just days of the agreement, days of the deal. The President of the United States understands who he is dealing with, who he is negotiating with, and they just cannot be trusted. So as we continue the very busy news weekend that was as the war continues in Iran, we are currently, at least as it stands right now, very dynamic, very fluid situation. Currently in the midst of a 2-week ceasefire. We're approaching the week one of that. I think that'll be on Wednesday, I think is the day that is. So we're almost halfway to throughout that 2-week period of time. As you just heard, Vice President JD Vance in Pakistan over the weekend, 21 hours worth of negotiations with the Iranians to try and come to some sort of agreement as to how this can be moved forward. The concessions that the Iranians are refusing to give up are deal breakers for the United States. They want to continue with a military-based, weapons-based nuclear program. The United States says no. The rest of the country, the rest of the world seemingly is okay with that, which, of course, is some of the irony in all of this, right? You've got all of these countries throughout Europe that are a much greater, have a much greater risk of dealing with a weapon from Iran. They don't seem to care, right? They'll pretend to care. They'll be the first ones calling the United States for help. God forbid that the Iranians do develop some sort of weapon like that and look at targeting countries either throughout the Middle East or throughout portions of Europe. Right? They'll be the first ones to beg and plead for the United States. Oh, please help. Please send help. Please do this. Meanwhile, they have got a golden opportunity right now. All of these countries outside of Pakistan, who's brokering these deals, but everybody else, they've had a golden opportunity to get in on these negotiations, and they've chosen not to. I mean, you've got the NATO secretary, who I actually liked. He has said some flattering things about the United States in the past, seems to have a lot of respect for President Donald Trump. He wants nothing to do with this. The vast majority of Europe wants nothing to do with this. A couple of countries in the Middle East, Pakistan, the UAE, other countries, they want to have and have been playing some hand in the negotiations. It is just hilarious to me that those entities, most of them throughout Europe, want nothing to do with this whatsoever. They're fat, drunk, and happy on cheap oil from Iran, and they don't care that the Iranian people and the Iranian regime chant death to the Western world, want to see Western democracy and Western civilization crumble under its very fingers. It's just shocking to me that that's the case. We know that these many of these so-called allies throughout the rest of the world are weak and ineffective and useless. I really thought, however, that we would see something as it relates to these countries. And I'm genuinely very disappointed that we have not. And going back to a point made a couple of weeks ago here on the show, I think when this is all said and done, which I think will probably be sooner rather than later, it is time that we seriously take a hard look in the mirror at entities like NATO, like the United Nations, and any of these other coalitions that the United States is in. We put a boatload of time, money, and effort into these facilities and to these entities, and frankly, get absolutely nothing in return. We're providing NATO countries the vast majority of their military support. We've got U.S. troops and bases all over the globe in defense of NATO. For what? For our allies to spit in our face when we're trying to disarm an entity that calls for and chants death to America, death to the Western world? What are we doing? It is high time that we seriously take a hard look in the mirror and renegotiate some of these deals. Great comment coming in on the program. People are used to the United States administration caving in the first round of talks. That's not happening here. That's a great point. That was on my mind over the weekend, as we just heard from JD Vance, heard from the president as well. That is very much the status quo. The United States doesn't like these long-scale conflicts, and rightfully so. But the United States is first to cave. Right? We are used to seeing, unfortunately, weak administrations that are willing to cave to bad faith actors, bad faith individuals like Iran. But we're not seeing that with this administration. And so you kind of have to recalibrate your thinking about this stuff. You have to look at it, I think, from a very different standpoint when you realize and come to the realization that this is not your normal U.S. administration conducting these operations, conducting these negotiations. Let's be perfectly clear about what we're talking about. The United States and its vast military, its vast economy, and all of the things that we produce, we are not going to be backed into a corner by a country that has been largely rubblized by the United States. We are not going to be backed into a corner by a country that now has no military, no navy, no air force. Their supreme leader was blown to pieces by the United States about 5 weeks ago. We are not going to be backed into a corner by them. I mean, this is what negotiations are. When you have all of the leverage, which is what the United States has, you don't give up. You keep pushing forward. Iran, as I've mentioned, is the only one that's got anything to lose in this. Now, yes, we can talk about oil prices. We will. We have in the past. I'm not oblivious. I'm not wiping that stuff off and completely ignoring it. It is a major portion of the discussion. Absolutely. But outside of short-term oil price gains, what are we really talking about here? What are we really talking about with Iran? We're talking about their ability to spin centrifuges and enrich uranium. That's all that they've got. That's all the negotiating power that they have. And over the last 40 years or so, we have unfortunately seen pretty consistently that they are unwilling to agree, or not necessarily agree, but follow through on something that they've agreed to. There have been multiple times in which we have heard from the Iranians that they are not going to continue enriching uranium. But they do, because they're bad faith negotiators. They're bad faith actors. And they really, when boil all of this down to, they just can't be trusted. President Donald Trump knows that. Steve Witkoff knows that. JD Vance knows that. Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio. The list goes on and on and on. They know that the Iranians cannot be trusted. And from the Iranian standpoint, they're used to negotiating with the United States that just bends over backwards to the will of Iran. That's not the case with President Donald Trump. I mentioned this last week when we were talking about the 2-week ceasefire deal that was announced by the president. If Iran does not follow through with the terms of this 2-week deal, which we've got some pretty big details on that we'll have here in just a couple of minutes. If they don't follow through on that, the president is going to go forward, I believe, with his original plan, which was going after their infrastructure and decimating it. He is not going to be dog-walked by Iran. He is not going to be backed into a corner, as we shouldn't. This is not a Trump thing. This is a U.S. thing. We are the world's leader. We have the most powerful military. We have all of these great things in the United States. We are not going to be backed into a corner and be told how to negotiate and how to operate by freaking Iran. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous when you look at it at face value. A lot of this has been over the Strait of Hormuz. The president making a big announcement on that over the weekend. We'll get into those details coming up here in just a couple of minutes as the Nick Craig Show continues on this Monday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Before we go continue with that, I want to tell you about the law group here in Wilmington and thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show, and remind you that when legal challenges or questions arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group. Going all the way back to 2003, Melissa Gott and her team at the law group, the experienced attorneys there, have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across Eastern North Carolina. I went through the process of purchasing my home, my real estate transaction using Melissa Gott and the team over at the law group, and they had my back every step of the way. The dedicated team there made sure any questions that I had were answered as quickly as possible. I was a first-time home buyer, so the entire process brand new to me. Melissa Gott and her team helped me and walked me through the entire process. They're located in downtown Wilmington, and they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online lawgroupnc.com. It's the law group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the law group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. We'll talk about the president's plans for the Strait of Hormuz, plus an exclusive interview he did with Maria Bartiromo of the Fox News channel yesterday as well, as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a busy Monday morning, streaming live, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Monday to you, and welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. It has been a busy news weekend, as often is the case with the Trump administration. A lot ongoing, focusing primarily today on international news. As the war with Iran continues to rage, we are in the midst of a 2-week ceasefire deal that was supposed to open the Strait of Hormuz. The United States would not conduct any more strikes. We would not obliterate and decimate their infrastructure, whether we're talking about their power grid, their power generation, or their physical infrastructure, bridges, and things of that nature. As you've already heard, and as we just played, Vice President JD Vance, 21 hours worth of negotiations in Pakistan over the weekend. Those, unfortunately, coming up empty. Apparently, almost everything else agreed to, minus the fact that Iran would not continue with a military nuclear program. So with this news, with the lack of negotiation over the weekend, President Donald Trump announced plans to blockade the Strait of Hormuz after those negotiations fell apart. With the president writing in part on Truth Social, effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. The blockade will begin shortly. Other countries will be involved with this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to profit off of this illegal act of extortion. And so what it seems like from what I'm hearing and from what the president is saying on this, he is going to attempt to starve out Iran. Don't allow them to ship any of their oil, whether refined or not, throughout the rest of the world. And a lot of that, of course, goes to places in Europe. A lot of that goes to China as well. He is saying no more. The United States is going to control the entry and exit points of the Strait of Hormuz. And so this blockade that the president is talking about is rather interesting, as he has been negotiating for weeks now to try and get the strait open. And so this is another, I guess, position and another strategy that the president is trying to take to prove that we're serious about this, that we're not playing around, that the United States is not going to allow this process to continue to play out. The president called into Maria Bartiromo's Sunday Morning Future show on the Fox News channel yesterday morning, talking about this. He laid out a little bit at the beginning of the interview why this is going on, what is going on with the Iranian regime. Here is the president of the United States over the weekend.
Mr. President, I want to ask you about that because you put out a tweet and it really gripped the nation a week ago when we were all waiting and watching for the United States' next move should the Iranians not open the Strait of Hormuz. And you wrote this on Truth Social: a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. However, now that we have a complete and total regime change where different, smarter, and less radicalized minds prevail, maybe something wonderful can happen. Mr. President, you were criticized for this tweet because you said a whole civilization will die tonight. What do you want to say about that? And what can you tell us about next steps here? Are you planning further destruction?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. That statement brought them to the table, with the exception of the one thing, which I believe that they're going to give up on. I believe they're going to give up on that pretty soon, to be honest, because it's not going to work. We actually thought we had them, and then all of a sudden they said, no, we won't. So, but I believe, no. And when I say that, but remember, what have they said to us? For years, I've had to listen to them say, death to America, right? They say, death to America, death to Israel, America, the Satan, we will destroy America, death to America. Now, does anybody ever complain to you when they say that? I think that's a big step worse. Death to America. So they're allowed to say death to America. And what I'm referring to is, when I talk about civilization, it'll be much different because their military will be totally gone. It's pretty much gone now. But their military, look at their leadership. We have had regime change because the people we dealt with yesterday were, frankly, very smart, very sharp, very good. I think they were smarter than the people from before, Khomeini and that group. Because look what it got them. Look what all of their antics was spending They spent all their money on weapons. We've destroyed most of those weapons. But, when I say about a civilization, it really has changed. It really has. But think of it. They're allowed to say, death to America, death to this, death to... I make one statement, they say, oh, such a big deal. Let me tell you, that statement got them to the bargaining table, and they haven't left. They haven't left the bargaining table. I predict they come back and they give us everything we want. And I told my people, I want everything. I don't want 90%. I don't want 95%. I told them, I want everything.
Well,
and so that obviously kind of sets the stage with the president there saying, he wants everything in these negotiations. And obviously the big holdout, the big issue, as I've mentioned and as we have discussed in great detail over the last 5 or 6 weeks, is the nuclear program as it relates to military weapons, building a nuclear warhead and putting it on the front of an ICBM or some sort of ballistic missile, and that's it. I mean, that's what they're going after. And so the president making it abundantly clear there that is what the United States is still after. That is the deal. Some other information coming out of this interview from that took place on Maria Bartiromo's show over the weekend. The president talking about minesweepers, as Iran's great plan in all of this was to put mines all over the bottom of the Strait of Hormuz so that ships passing through would hit these mines, blow up, create a whole bunch of chaos in the region. The president talked about that as well on his Fox News interview.
Now we have highly sophisticated underwater minesweepers, which are the latest and the greatest, but we're also bringing in more traditional minesweepers. And so I understand is the UK and a couple of other countries are sending minesweepers. A lot of countries don't have minesweepers. Think of it. They had 28 mine droppers. What country has 28 mine droppers? 28 boats to drop mines. What country? They've been completely obliterated. They no longer. So we knocked out their entire Navy. They have 158 ships. They have 28 mine droppers. Every single one of them is at the bottom of the sea. Can you believe it? We did that in 4 days. Their Air Force is gone. Their if you look, anti-aircraft, all of their radars out. Anti-aircraft is, their defensive program is all knocked out. They don't have anything. And the sad part is, and I can't say this is for you, we knocked out everything, including their leaders. Their military is gone. Everything's gone. Their missiles are down to a trickle by comparison,
And, again, backing up the point here, what does Iran really have to negotiate at this point? What sort of great hand does Iran currently have at the poker table that they're going to lay out and win the pot? I just don't see it. I don't think they're sitting on pocket aces. I think they're sitting on what's the worst hand in poker? A 3-7 offsuit or a 2-7 offsuit, something like that. That's what they've got. The president lays out very clearly. Military, decimated. Navy, literally non-existent. Every single boat, every single ship sunk. Their Air Force, if you want to call it that, their aviation program, gone. Their anti-aircraft. I mean, I mentioned this last week. The United States and Israel have flown like 1,300 missions over, or 13,000 missions over Iran over the past 5 weeks. And there has been one example that we saw last weekend, Easter weekend, in which the Iranians were successful in downing a craft. One out of all of those trips, all of the different runs, all of the different strikes that have taken place. So what are they truly negotiating with? What do they truly have to bring the United States to the table from the Iranian standpoint and force the United States to their will, to their wishes? I just don't see it, at least as of right now. I don't truly understand what their objective is with all of this and how they believe that they are going to get an upper hand here on the United States. Maybe I'm dead wrong about this. I just don't see it. No, there's been nothing that I have read, nothing that I have watched over the last 6 weeks that make me feel any different about this situation. So we're talking about the blockade that the President of the United States and Donald Trump announced over the weekend as the talks between the United States and Iran were not successful in Pakistan. Vice President JD Vance negotiating for some 21 hours over the weekend, talking about trying to negotiate with the Iranians, trying to put together a deal to stop their enrichment program of uranium and guarantee long term that they will not strive to do that they will not seek to build those nuclear weapons. The president also highlighted in this Fox News interview some of his frustrations with NATO. No surprise there at all. Here is the president on Fox News yesterday.
But other countries do. And I will tell you, while we're on the subject, we're very disappointed with NATO. We're very, very disappointed that they didn't come. Now they want to come and they want to help with the Strait, and it won't take long to clean it out. So we're going to clean out the Strait, and they'll be able to use the Strait in not too long a distance. But we had a very intensive negotiation, and toward the end it got very friendly, and we got just about every point we needed, except for the fact that they refused to give up their nuclear ambition. And that's the only point, frankly, to me. That was the most important point by far.
So there's the president, again, talking about NATO, talking about how the negotiations and the deals continue. More from President Donald Trump in this exclusive interview with Fox News over the weekend.
This morning saying that we will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. And at some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in and all being allowed to go out basis. Right. So tell us what you're trying to accomplish with this blockade,
all in,
sir.
All out. Yep. It's called all in and all out. There'll be a time when we'll have them all come in and all come out, but it won't be a percentage. It won't be a friend of yours like a country that's your ally or a country that's your friend. Is all or nothing, and that'll be that won't be in too long a distance. No, we're just bringing the ships up. We got a lot of ships, so we're bringing them up. We think that numerous countries are going to be helping us with this also, but we're putting on a complete blockade. We're not going to let Iran make money on selling oil to people that they like and not people that they don't like or whatever it is. It's going to be all or none, and that's the way it is. And it'll be, you saw what we did with Venezuela. It'll be something very similar to that, but at a higher level.
And Mr. President, you say that there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows.
And so the mine is a part of that as well. As the president noted in one of those earlier clips, minesweepers, not only from the United States, but I guess now all of a sudden Europe is interested in helping as it relates. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because they are one of the largest purchasers of Iranian oil. So I guess now that we're at the point where we're talking about these minesweepers, that they're now all of a sudden very interested in this situation, had nothing to say beforehand, we're not interested in having any of these discussions. Now all of a sudden we're starting to hear from a variety of these NATO and European countries on this situation. The United States or the Iranians are now trying to figure out how to do and move forward with this, with the Iranian president saying on Sunday an agreement with the United States was possible if Washington, quote, abandons its totalitarianism and respects the rights of the Iranian nation. Oh, that's all you guys want? Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll take your word on that. Sure. Yeah, we need to respect your rights as the president laid out. Death to America, death to the Western world, death to democracy. But we need to respect the rights of the Iranian nation. Yeah, well, maybe if you guys had been better actors over the last 40 years, we might be willing to do that. I mean, this is an age-old tale of actions equaling consequences. The lack of any sort of negotiating ability from the side of the Iranians over the last 40 years, the consistent backtracking on previous agreements that have been made with the United States and other nations has led us to this point. I mean, this is quintessential actions have consequences. You can't lie to the United States and to other nations and to other groups for all this time, and then cry on Twitter, which is what the Iranian president did on Sunday, and say, oh, well, you just have to respect the rights of Iran. He went on to write, if the American government abandons its totalitarianism and respects the rights of the Iranian nations, of the Iranian nation, ways to reach an agreement will certainly be found. He also went on to praise Iran's negotiating team, including a variety of different speakers before the talks broke down on Sunday, forcing the vice president to say, okay, well, we tried 21 hours worth of negotiations, and we are moving back. And the vice president, JD Vance, now back stateside with this news. So the blockade is going to be interesting. Obviously, that caused oil prices to immediately skyrocket. We saw them drop and plunge significantly last week with the announcement of the 2-week ceasefire and the Strait of Hormuz opening, at least temporarily, for that 2-week period of time. And so now we're in a position, now we're at a time where those prices are now skyrocketing again because of this blockade announcement. So the question really is going to be, what does that blockade look like? You know, obviously, step number one is to get all of the mines that are potentially on the floor of the Strait of Hormuz cleared out so that boats don't have to risk going through there and being blown to pieces. That's obviously, at least from my vantage point, that would be objective number one in wrapping up some of the details in this conflict. Once that is done, then the president says we're going to have a blockade and it's going to be an all-in, all-out approach. Every ship that wants to go through, regardless of the nation's flag that is flying off the back of it, will be allowed to go through the strait. And, this comes back to something that we heard very early in this conflict that I hope the president continues to reiterate. Who should be worried about the Strait of Hormuz being opened? Who should have a bigger vested interest? The United States or Europe? Of course, it's Europe. When you look at the amount of U.S. oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz, it's less than 5%. In the grand scheme of U.S. oil, it is almost non-existent, less than 5%. Most of Europe cannot say that. Most of the Middle East cannot say that. But the U.S. can. And so who really should have an interest in making this happen? It should be Europe. It should be NATO. It should be countries like Pakistan, like the UAE. They have got a much stronger interest in oil and just generally, in general, things flowing through the strait. And so they have now yet another opportunity to do that. They have yet another opportunity to make that happen. I'm going to be blunt and as honest as I can possibly be about it. I don't have a lot of confidence and faith. The NATO secretary, I think, made a fool of himself over the weekend saying, oh my God, we can't believe that the United States is doing this. I don't get it. I really am struggling to wrap my head around what the big win is going to be here for these NATO countries and for these European nations. They have way more on the line. They have way more to lose as it relates to Iran, both militarily and now from an oil perspective and an energy perspective. It's completely and totally illogical. Yet it continues. So a lot probably to unfold here over the next couple of days as the ceasefire is still in place as of right now. There's no reports that the United States has conducted any additional military operations. We'll see if Iran reacts to this blockade and how that plays out. And we'll see what the next step is from the president. As I've mentioned now a couple of times, the option to decimate their infrastructure, decimate their electrical grid is still very much on the table from my vantage point. The question is going to be, how far does Iran want to walk up to that line? I mean, to me, that's really kind of the million-dollar question with all of this. So we'll keep an eye on those details over the next couple of days. As there is relevant news, as there is relevant information, we'll bring it to you here on the show. I'm not going to spend every show every single day for the next 2 weeks talking about it. I got a couple of comments late last week as to why I wasn't talking about Iran. I've made my points abundantly clear. When there's big news, when there's big information, we'll talk about it, but I'm not going to spend an hour here every day essentially rehashing the same thing over and over again. Pretty significant news this weekend. The blockade is set to start coming up here at about 10 o'clock this morning Eastern time. So we'll see what that looks like. I'm sure we'll have some small update tomorrow, but we'll keep an eye on that and everything else unfolding, not only across the United States, but here in North Carolina as well. We'll bring it all to you right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that is going to do it for a Monday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Monday. We'll be back here tomorrow morning for The Nick Craig Show.